know whether it's going to rain, it's going to be sunny. You don't know whether there'll be floods. Whatever the weather, it rains in Mutegi's neighborhood, it doesn't rain in mine. So what exactly is happening in this world? A lot of people are asking. So today we want to focus a little on what is called climate change and what could be happening around us that could endanger our livelihoods or make our lives better. And we're joined in the studio by Mr. John Kioli, who is the chairman of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, a network of organizations involved in climate change, and Mr. Ayub Shaka, who is the assistant director in charge of public and media services at the Kenya Meteorological Department. Karibuni, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Did I forecast well that you don't know whether it's raining or it's going to be sunny? What is happening with the climate? Let us know what exactly is happening with the climate.
I think climate change, first of all, is any significant change that has been recorded for a period of about 50 years. We are so clear now that things have changed. Even where you used to have water, there is no water. And there are repeated drought cycles than before. If you go to Eldoret, you'll find now they are buying more nets for malaria and buying more medicine for malaria. Yet before, you are hearing that in the highlands there are no mosquitoes. This is because of an increase of temperature that is now enabling mosquitoes actually to be able to survive in such areas which were very cold before. So that increase of temperature is what sometimes is also referred as global warming, that has now made us not get the normal weather patterns we used to get long time.
Right.
Yes.
Nothing predictable anymore.
Well,
Before
right
I come
now,
to Ayub Shaka to tell us what to expect.
yes, we can predict because there are already models which have been put across that if we continue business as usual in the next like 50, 100 years, then islands like Mombasa will be no more, because any increase of water because of global warming, then these islands and small islands in the world will actually sink. So definitely we can predict if we continue business as usual, then there will be no, you can predict what will happen actually.
What do you mean business as usual?
Business as usual, if the factories continue emitting the smoke the way they're emitting, if we continue using transport the way we are using, and not having any measures to cut down on issues of climate change, then that is what we call business as usual. But if you have mitigation measures, if you have adaptation measures, then you are able to actually mitigate and adapt to climate.
I thought there was a move to award countries and areas that under forest cover, so that you trade and you get money from those countries that emit. Is that any help?
It does help, and those are some of the mitigation measures I'm talking about. If we continue without them, that is what we call business as usual. If we continue with those measures, which are mostly mitigation measures, and if we adapt, because as a country our priority is adaptation, because we're already in the problem. We don't have money as other countries in the world, that first world countries which can even buy a blanket when it's cold. Our country, if we had snow today, I'm telling you, people will die because the adaptation capacity is very low.
We will get back to our contribution to those global patterns in a moment, and whether it's the West or us in the developing countries that are responsible for this disastrous climate. But Mr. Ayub Shaka,
yes, sir.
There was an earlier prediction or forecast, let me use the professional word, that there's going to be El Nino in October. Should we be worried or expecting?
Well, it's true. El Nino conditions had started being seen around June, and that time it was within the neutral phase, and it was expected to be, by this time, it was expected to be, almost a full-blown El
Please
Nino.
tell us what is neutral phase.
Yeah, I'll explain. I'll explain.
Yes.
Because before El Nino happens, there's a kind of in terms of indexes, there's a level where it reaches, and then we say it is neutral before it moves either negative or positive. That's where it is neutral. Now, by June, it was around neutral, and we continued monitoring, and we had forecasted that by around this time, that's September, October, it would be above neutral, and therefore become a full-blown El Nino. But at the moment, we are still within a neutral phase, although the forecast still indicates that by say November, it will be about 60% kind of above neutral or outside neutral, and therefore cause some kind of a weak El Nino.
Okay,
So
of
we're
course,
still
people who
monitoring.
are watching who may not know what El Nino is,
Yes.
maybe you just classify that or explain it a little more so that we know what you mean in terms of actual weather behavior.
Okay. El Nino is actually a phenomena which affects our weather in here in East Africa. Actually, the whole manifestation starts from Pacific Ocean, where temperatures or sea surface temperatures increase and affect our weather here. When sea surface temperatures increase in Pacific Ocean, Central Pacific Ocean, it tends to have some kind of a teleconnection or connection with our weather. In our case, it enhances the rainfall over here in October, November, December. And in the other parts of the world, like South Africa, it decreases the rainfall. In other words, they tend to have drought. So when we talk of El Nino, is that phenomena which enhances rainfall within our East African region.
Okay.
And the opposite is La Nina.
Yes.
When we have low temperatures or cold temperatures over the Pacific, we tend to have a deficit rainfall here.
Yeah.
So it tends to affect our rainfall in the sense that it decreases rainfall. But this El Nino, I must point here that this El Nino phenomena do not affect the our season the same way. Every year is unique. So whenever you have an El Nino, it could be a weak El Nino, a moderate, or a strong El Nino.
So when have we
Like
had
the one we
those?
had in 97, 98,
Yes.
that was a very strong El Nino.
Right.
The one we're expecting is a weak El Nino. And we have had El Ninos for a long time. It's not that it's the first time.
Okay.
Why are you talking about Pacific? East Africa has nothing to do with the Pacific. We are very far from there.
Exactly.
So why is it affecting us? Are we not Indian Ocean,
Okay.
which is next to us?
Okay. These are atmospheric kind of conditions which, as you know, weather does not have boundaries. And when you have global circulation, weather from Pacific can affect us here because of the flow and the distribution of moisture within the globe. So according to science, or rather studies which have been made, any kind of temperature increase over the Pacific has got some connection with the East African weather, simply because of the circulation. But of course, as you mentioned correctly, Indian Ocean has got a lot of effect on our side because that's where we get the source of moisture for our rains and so on. But it tends to enhance that influx of moisture to our region.
So let me ask you, for somebody watching, we have had very unpredictable weather patterns. I mean, people are used to April it rains, August it rains, in between is cold and hot, you know, like that. December is hot and a bit of rain. Now we don't get those patterns anymore. To what do you attribute this? Or are you still able to tell that there are predictable weather patterns really anymore?
Yeah, for a short time, yes, we can predict, but what you mentioned is true, that the climate variability, that is those changes from rain to sunshine, rain to sunshine, those kind of things, or high temperatures and low temperatures, are what we call climate variability. My friend talked about climate change. Those variabilities, they can increase the cycle or reduce the cycle depending on the changes which are taking place. Now, all those things you're mentioning are attributed to climate change. You know, the atmosphere is responding to some kind of pollutions and the activities of human beings as we do our business, and therefore the whole system is getting affected.
Can you, at the meteorological department, assist Kenyans to know when to plant? If you tell people in Kitale, now go and plant. People in Meru, now go and plant. Are you able to do that?
Yes.
Specifically.
We are able to do that, yes, because when it comes to those kind of seasonal focus, we are okay there. We are accurate in the sense that we can tell when the rains are starting, and we can, working with the agricultural officers, ask the farmers or whoever to do whatever they know best around at a given time.
Why is
Yeah.
it that people now plant and then there's no rain?
And we hear failed rains or
Failed
short rains.
Why?
It's very frequent now.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, those climate variabilities are increasing simply because of climate change. And it is in view of that, we now need to use the climate information services to be able to plan things. You know, probably when you are growing up, you'll be told by March 15, the rains
Umeweka-
will come.
Umepalilia.
By
Ama
September,
umepanda.
maybe 15, some places it starts raining.
Yeah.
Those kind of things are normal. Things have changed.
Mm.
The rains can come early, can come late. Therefore, you need to get climate information so that you can be able to plan using that information, not the old climatological kind of information.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I was young, I used to see things called rain gauge. They used to have some little things there.
They still exist.
Are they still there?
Yeah, the rain gauges are still there, only that most of them were volunteers. You know, we used to get a lot of information from volunteers, but now the volunteers, the numbers have gone down because of the kind of lifestyles Kenyans are leading, and I think the volunteering
So who is
mood
doing the rain gauge now?
attitude is no more.
Who is gauging?
We still measure. We have some rainfall stations, the ones which we run,
Mm.
but most of them used to be owned by volunteers. Some farmer, like you Mtegi or Makali, you can host a rain gauge.
Yes.
But when some farmers decide not to continue, I mean, we cannot have all the funds to have rain gauges dotted all over the country. But we have, of course, we have got stations which we monitor, about 600 rainfall stations. But we used to have more, most of them being volunteers.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay, finally, before we move to the other subject.
Yes.
So between now and December, what are we expecting in this country in terms of the weather?
Okay. Between now and December, for most of the areas, we're expecting normal rainfalls to above normal, especially for a good part of eastern Kenya, Nairobi, and a portion of western Kenya. But the Central Rift Valley, we expect to have normal to below normal rainfall.
You know,
I want to qualify that statement.
yes.
Yes, I know that's why you are laughing.
Because those words just struck me the way I had
Yes,
them
yes, yes.
15 years ago.
I want to qualify that.
Yes.
It's when you talk about normal, it's not like the whole country will have the same kind of rainfall. No.
Yes.
Normal in Nairobi is different from normal in Garissa.
Yes.
It's different from normal in Mombasa.
Yeah.
Different from normal in
Normal
Western
within
Kenya.
your normal living
Yes.
conditions.
Now,
yes.
within that, that's now national climate outlook
Yeah.
forecast.
Yeah.
But we have now county directors who are able to downscale that information
Yes.
to suit the local area,
Mm.
because they have got skills to interpret that information and relate it to the local situation,
more narrow.
so that they can now advise
localized.
people at that level
Yeah.
properly. What I've
Okay.
just said is kind of national level.
Yeah, because you know why I smile is because those areas are very broad. You say central,
Yes.
and like I said, like last night it was raining in Ongata Rongai, and there was not a drop of rain in Nairobi City, in the CBD.
Yes.
And these are within 10 kilometers. I mean, 20 kilometers apart. So when you
Even
say
5
central
kilometer
or
can be.
if, lower eastern,
Yes.
really those are hundreds of kilometers apart.
Yeah.
Are you able to actually say that will be experienced in
Exactly.
an
That's what I'm saying. We have officers at the country level who are able to now tell, at least up to ward level,
area? Mm.
they can say the Great Corner or this size of
Yes.
Kileleshwa, it will be like this, but the airport site will be different, that kind of thing.
Oh, it's possible.
What do they use to
Possible.
know to determine that? Since your equipment is there, Dagoretti, what is it that your field officers or counter people use?
It's not that the equipment is in Dagoretti.
That's what you think.
I know. The whole all the kind of computers which analyze that information is in Dagoretti, but we also have other facilities at the country level which can be able to tell us what kind of weather will be at some levels, and therefore using some other modeling, they can now downscale, fit in the conditions at the country level to get to those smaller scale areas.
Okay, finally, to what level scale can they predict or forecast? You know, because as I said, it looks like you need an estate to estate forecast in Nairobi at
Say
this
for
point.
instance, we are going
Because
to Ngong, you fight Karen, it's very
yeah,
rain.
it
Yeah.
will
In
rain
Karen.
here.
When you go to Ngong, nothing, zero,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yes.
For days.
Even between here, for example, on Jogo Road,
Yeah.
you find it's raining in the CBD. It's not raining in Donholm
Yeah.
or in Kangemi.
So those are the kind of things
So
I'm telling you now. They will be able
difficult.
to bring out those differences.
Mm.
Because at national level, you cannot be able to tell the whole country that Nairobi, the Great Corner is
So
going
what
to be like
equipment
this.
do they use?
They use the same equipment we use, but this time round, they now downscale it with using some modeling systems, or rather computer systems, which can ingest in the data and they bring out those differences.
Mm.
Yes, because
Okay.
we have a lot of data we are using from satellite, from people, volunteers, and so on. So we are able to downscale
Alright.
to that level, at least
Alright.
now up to sub-count level.
Yeah, okay. We'll come back to Kioli.
Mm.
The global issues about climate change now and patterns. To what do we attribute all these, phenomena and what you're calling variabilities? Yeah.
I think we all live in a planet that is actually a village where whatever happens in the US affects an African year, affects Caribbean, affects Asia. The reason is we use the same sun that radiates its radiation to the earth, and what happens is because of the smoke and other what we call greenhouse gases that have formed like a blanket on top of the earth, these rays are not able to go back as they are, because it's a phenomena of the greenhouse. The way you get into a greenhouse house, you find that it's very hot. It admits temperatures but does not release. So that is a form of temperatures that are affecting. You have to look at climate change from the whole world perspective. That whatever happens in Europe affects Kenya. So that is a phenomena that is actually making Shaka not be able even to predict as good as he wants, because of that blanket that we call greenhouse gases that is not emitting the sun rays back to the atmosphere as he would. But as a country, we have come back home and formed what we call the Climate Change Bill, which is 2014, that is in Parliament, awaiting the third hearing. And one of the major things that made us think about that is the fact that as a country, we had about 90 legislation affecting issues of climate change. We had the MCA 1999 that deals with the environment. We had the Water Act, we had the Energy Act, and all these acts are saying small bits of climate change. But there was no dedicated standalone policy bill that was talking about climate change. So after doing an analysis of about 90 legislations, civil society together with a member of parliament who is called Honorable Dr. Wiba Otichilo came with a private member's bill that was now collating all these regulations to form what is called climate change bill. The highlights of the climate change bill are one, to have a council that will be dealing with climate change. The council will be having the principal secretary in the Ministry of Energy, the principal secretary in the Ministry of Environment, the principal secretary in the Ministry of Planning and Economic, and then have private sector, have CSOs, which is civil society, have people with marginalized groups, and also people of that are of different categories. Now, they will be having a council that will be meeting to deal with issues of climate change from a multi-sectoral approach. Previously, climate change was thought of like only a Ministry of Environment thing, but it's an environmental issue. It is above issues of environment, because it's going to affect the infrastructure, it's going to affect issues of health, it's going to affect tourism. In fact, it has impacted on tourism in this country very much, because Mara River now cannot be predicted because of what has happened. There are less tourists, and that impacts on the development. So after that, we also came up with a climate change fund, a fund that will be pulled together as a basket, where if the government want to do anything with climate change, they can pull their civil society, private sector, they can be able to pull from that bag and deal with issues of climate change. I mentioned earlier that as a country, our priority is adaptation, because right now, if you wanted to do mitigation, it takes a longer time. If you plant trees now, they will take a longer time. That is, of course, the longer look at it. But adaptation is like build a dam to be able to get water immediately and navigate about food security. Have irrigation measures that will give an instant, first of all, solution to issues of climate change and food security. Then have those mitigation measures at the background, which will be more long term. And look at renewable energy. Have a solar lantern that makes this lady who cooks and in the kitchen, first of all, inhaling gases from from the kitchen, and
Yeah.
then again having the koroboi that
Yeah.
again
But
gives
in terms
fumes.
of global approaches, what is the priority intervention in climate change regulation?
You see,
What are the leading interventions?
the interventions now are we have what we call the Conference of Parties, where there are, there are countries which have agreed to have an intervention of climate change. There are more than 100 countries. So they usually sit every November, December of the year to deal with issues of climate change. The priority as what we call Annex 2 countries or non-developed countries is adaptation. Adaptation means to deal with the issues immediately and deal with the issues on how, I always give an example. Adaptation is like giving me medicine.
Yeah,
Mitigation is like giving me a vaccine that will deal with the issue
prevent.
permanently.
Yeah.
But if you have malaria, you will actually need medicine now. You don't need a vaccine.
So what we need ourselves is
Yes.
the malaria
Yes, we need a vaccine. I mean, we need medicine immediately.
medication. Yeah.
And then deal with the issues of vaccine as a long approach.
Yeah.
So that is the outlook of non-developed countries and small islands. We are looking at adaptation as
Yeah.
a measures. And we are also applying the principle of polluter pays, meaning that those countries who are responsible for climate change,
Yeah.
they should be able to give us funds in this basket. They should be able to
Yeah.
fund dams. They should be able to fund forests to be, to have trees. They should be able to fund even geothermal activities which are renewable, so that they can start paying for their sins that they committed in the agrarian revolution, because that's where the problem started.
Yeah.
We are actually responsible for 0.000% as a country, but we are suffering because was what Europe did in the agrarian revolution.
What exactly is this that has been done by the West that has caused the climate crisis?
You see, it
Particularly.
started industrialization, which put a lot of greenhouse gases
Yes.
in the air. At that time, probably your grandmother, your grandfather was only the best machine he had was a djembe,
Oh, yes.
which has no responsibility for greenhouse gases. Now, they did their factories, they did everything. So we are saying, beyond what Mutegi was earlier saying about, we were discussing with him about carbon credits, because that is the hula baloo, oh, we are going to pay. But you see, carbon credits, ideally, it's like I continue polluting, and you continue paying me to plant trees. So it's actually not ending. So what we need is not that carbon credits. What we need is actually them to bring money to do actual projects here and pay for their sins, which they committed so many years ago.
But are they doing that?
Okay, there's an
Is there an
adaptation
agree-
fund
is there
that
an
has been
agreement?
formed,
Yes.
but the problem I'll tell you, Mutegi, is that most of these developed countries are turning now the ODA, which they used to bring, the Overseas Development Assistance, into climate change. We are saying no, continue giving us ODA, but in support of that, also bring what we call the Climate Change Adaptation Fund on top of that. Do not baptize the things that you committed 10 years to do,
Yeah.
50 years to do to Kenya as climate change fund. Bring new and fresh income that will be going towards these things. And this is not a favor.
Yeah. So in terms of mitigation as a country, I mean, we have seen a lot of controversy around interventions in conservation efforts. We heard, of course, about the Mau. In fact, the country has set up what is called the Water Towers Authority. How effective is that working? Shaka, maybe you can chip in as well as Kiol. Yeah.
Okay, you know very well that those water towers are made up of forests and highlands or water catchment areas, and therefore they are the sinks of carbon. So they absorb the amount of carbon which is being emitted all over. So the more we introduce forests, the more carbon we reduce from the atmosphere. And of course, as you said, we have to reduce the emissions so that we can probably get to some level. But to come to your question is, you'll notice that, as you mentioned, Mara River, some time back it was not flowing that much. It was actually almost getting depleted, or rather getting finished. But now it has improved significantly. Those are the kind of impacts we are getting, because the Mau forest has been improved and the vegetation there is improving. And when it rains, the rainwater percolates into the ground and maintains the river flow for some time. And the more we do that, the more the river will improve, because basically rivers are maintained by what is in the ground rather than what when it rains and whatever what you call runoff.
Yeah.
It's not maintain that runoff does not maintain rivers.
Mhm.
It is what goes into the soils and then comes out slowly.
Percolates
At
back
yeah,
into
percolates
the-
back into the rivers or the drainage systems slowly, so that can be stretched to a longer period.
Mm.
What
Yeah.
about Mount Kenya? Those dams that we have there, the Mount Kenya is almost depleted. And we understand those dams are going to be silted within a number of years. There will be no dams there.
Yeah, the dams are getting silted. I mean, silted because of the kind of deforestation going on. Because the more forests you have, the runoff will be less. But if you cut trees and the vegetation around there, then you'll have more runoff. Runoff comes along with sedimentation or soils, and then goes filling the dams.
Who is stopping that?
Now
Who is
that's
sto-
where
who is saving Mount Kenya?
that's where those water tower kind of authority comes in to plant trees and educate people not to continue destroying forests, and the public should also be educated to keep whatever forests we have and even plant more, so that we can maintain the forest to increase percolation of water and improve the river flows there. If you notice, some of those rivers around as you go towards Nanyuki, there used to be very many rivers, but now they have become maybe streams or even dried.
Yeah.
So it's because of that kind of influence, or rather cutting of trees we are having up there. But
How
of
do you
course-
explain this contradictory phenomenon, the fact of the endangered water masses and the rising sea level?
Okay. The rising sea level is not like one country or one area. It's global.
Yes.
You have permafrost in the polar, or rather the polar. And if temperatures rise, the ice there melts.
Yes, yes.
And when it melts,
Aha.
it increases the level of the sea.
water.
Yes, yes.
So some of those effects have started being realized in some parts, even in
Yeah.
Kenya.
Yeah.
The sea level is
It's
rising.
going up.
Is going up.
And yet we are saying there's water, disappearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, when that ice is used to be a big heap of ice blocks sitting in the polar.
Yes.
But now when it melts, that becomes liquid, and then it finds level.
Yes.
And like when you have a big solid thing, you can stand alone somewhere
Yes, yes, that's
and
true.
remain there. But when
Yeah.
it melts, it has to spread all over the world. So the water levels rise.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the explanation. Some lakes disappearing and then refilling. We've seen Lake Bogoria, Lake Nakuru. There was one time, I think Lake Baringo, they were almost extinct.
Yeah.
What are the prospects going ahead? Communities living around there and the ecosystems, should they be fearful?
I think it's about preparedness and to realize that climate change is so unpredictable and has affected quite a number of sectors. If you look at the water sector, the whole issue that you cannot predict if there will be water or not water. Look at Elementaita. Elementaita about 5 years ago was empty. Lake Baringo was almost empty. Right now there's a hotel actually, the reception is actually submerged by the water. There are quite a number of theories, but the theory I think I want to believe in is the issues of climate change, because the increase of water, the increase of precipitation when it's not required is an issue of greenhouse gases which are not managed. One of the things that, and also to answer Mr. Mutegi's question about who is going to address this, in the climate change bill, we have one of the principles which is cooperative government in terms of linking the national government with the county government. Actually, this bill will be managed by the county governments. Put it together in the CIDP's processes, the county development plans, so that it's mainstreamed, so that it comes part of your processes of planning. If you're planning about dams, plan it with a lens of climate change. Plan it with a lens of climate change in the management of finances, so that you allocate money for that. And know that, yes, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. When you look at issues of agriculture, right now, if we had an increase of 2 degrees only, tea will be normal, coffee will be normal. So as a county, we need to look for ways of managing that with a lens of climate change. because it is until the counties start actually dealing with climate change from their own perspective and not waiting for the national government to actually come and solve the issues. Because it is real, first of all, you have to believe it is there, and then plan for it with the two objectives, one mitigation and one adaptation. But priority is actually adaptation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you are watching, of course, you can ask your questions to the experts. John Kioli, who is the chairman of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, and Ayub Shaka from the Meteorological Department, looking at the weather and climate change patterns. Somebody has said, of course, the number is 22422 on the screen there. You can send us your text. Somebody says, Ayub, to your great, that the Meteorological Department has posted monthly and daily weather predictions on the net. They are actually 60% true. We use them here in Kitale, Luvaga from Maliki, so not too bad. I mean, if it's 60, it's a pass.
Yeah.
Above, almost. But somebody asked, what program on climate change is, okay, that's a compliment, but I'd like to know why Sagana State Lodge and Mataithi secondary, I think, observation stations are no more. What programs have been put in counties for climate change adaptation measures? I don't know whether anyone can respond to that, but I think that has to do with the gauges that you said were voluntary.
Yes.
Some are extinct. Somebody actually is taking note of that.
I'm happy to hear that somebody wants to revive a station which is no more, because really we need that information. And we have a program within the department which encourages establishment of rainfall stations and on voluntary basis, because really we cannot pay for, as I mentioned, we cannot pay for all those thousands of rainfall stations. But we want people who can host rain gauges to be able to relay information to us so that we can capture those differences you're talking about of it's raining here, it's not raining the other side. Those things need to be captured.
Yes.
Now, there's a program to do that, to increase the network. And I would like to encourage that person to get in touch with our county director in that county, and he or she will be given the rain gauge and the other documents which are necessary for them to continue.
We also used to have wet events. I used to see things which were going around. Horrible.
At airstrips, especially, and
Airstrips
fields.
or even in
Yeah.
towns or some place, in open fields.
Yeah.
They are no more.
Uh,
Does that mean that we don't need them?
no, we still need them. As I mentioned, those things were hosted by individuals. And if you want to change the development of your land, we cannot stop you.
Oh,
If
they
you
were
want to-
voluntary. Those are the
Yes,
voluntary ones.
Yes. If you say, I think.
But what were they used for?
They used to give that information to us so that we could include it in our modeling and get a more accurate kind of or try to analyze that area better.
Yeah.
But when we start getting those declines, then we have to think of how to go about it. But of course, now with technology we have satellite information, which may not be so accurate, but is better than nothing, because satellite can give us up to 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer. But that one we need to use it together with the rain gauge data, observed data, so that we can now what we call ground truthing, to confirm that actually what the satellite is giving us is indeed the same thing which is being observed at the ground level, or rather using a rain gauge.
Kelly, I don't know whether you are aware of this Cancun Agreement 2014. Somebody says, what are the Africa priorities and what is the government doing to advise transport sector to reduce emissions? This is from Anna of ITF.
I think Cancun was in
11.
2010 actually.
Yes.
Yeah, 2010. And when you look at issues that, first of all, was the operationalization of the adaptation fund that I actually talked about earlier. And one of the key highlights of that is the fact that the issue of Kyoto Protocol was coming to a close, and we needed to come up with a solution that will come and gap that area that was already missing a gap. Because if you remember, Kyoto Protocol was the one that came up with issues of carbon credits and the polluter pays principle in terms of having levels of, if you are meeting this as a country, you commit to be able to mitigate on what you're committing. But it was coming to a lapse, and actually it is one of the meetings that changed around that issue, although we didn't have an agreement per se, because it was not a legal binding until we went to South Africa in 2012, when we had what was more concrete in 2011, I think. So the issue of priorities for Annex 2 countries or developing countries was also very key in terms of our need is adaptation.
Yeah. Adaptation is the
Adaptation is
yeah.
a need, but it is more expensive than mitigation, and that's why these developed countries will always want to use the panya route of mitigation, because it's cheaper to do it, and there's no much commitment.
Yeah.
But if you compare a person in UK who can be able to afford an electric blanket when it's cold, and you compare somebody in Rachuonyo or in Kitui who cannot afford even a small blanket when it's very cold, then you see a disconnect. This person can be able to manage adaptation, climate change, because of the finances the person has. You can be able to heat your house, you can be able to cool your house, and you have the money. We don't have, as a country, we don't have, as Annex 2 countries, money to manage adaptation of climate change.
Yeah.
So again, the song of polluter pays principle was highlighted.
But the mitigation, I mean, how serious in your own assessment are we as a country in the mitigation aspect? Because people are still cutting trees. Charcoal burning is still rampant. I mean, environmental destruction is still ongoing.
I think one of the things that we are saying, it starts from you as a Kenyan. And I think for the government of Kenya, through the Ministry of Environment and Water, Mineral and Natural Resources, has committed to pass this bill to be able to govern issues of climate change. This is a commitment, I think, from the government to show, by example, that actually they are committed to reverse issues of climate change. Before, it was not very, very clear, because we started this journey in 2009 as civil society. It was like, this is your business.
But because of corruption, some of those mitigation factors you're talking about won't work. Say, to give you an example, if you look at most of the charcoal, which is used in Nairobi, comes from Kajiado, Narok, where there are no trees. They create a desert.
Yeah.
If you look on the way to Eastern, you see a lot of charcoal being sold there in Moya and those places, where there are no forests, no trees. And they come, and the police and the people, everybody knows. They have no business selling charcoal. Why is that happening?
I'll tell you two things. First of all, there is charcoal rules and regulations of 2009 that was an annex of the Forest Act of 2005. That law, if it is enforced today, Mutegi, you will not see, leave alone lorry, you putting a charcoal sack on the road. Because once you put a charcoal sack just next to your farm on the road, that is commercial. You need to get a license from Kenya Forest Service. If you don't have, then you just go in. But it is not enforced.
Why?
Because, first of all,
commissions, kickbacks, people
and
are lining the pockets.
And also the
together
attitude. Number two, Mutegi, is that how much are these brokers buying this charcoal in Kajiado? They are buying it at 2,200 shillings. Then come to Nairobi, it is 1,800, 2,000.
Yeah.
So this person will continue selling, because what can you do with 200? You need to sell like 10 to be able to get 2,000.
Yeah.
Now, we want to empower those people, first of all, to form cooperatives that are dealing with what we call charcoal producers associations, so that, first of all, they sell that charcoal at 600. If you sell that charcoal at 600, because whatever we say, about 500,000 households today are benefiting from charcoal.
Use charcoal.
2 million people are actually feeding school fees and everything from charcoal. So we might not run away from the fact that charcoal must continue being used.
Well, but
how is it used?
alternative
I'm
energy.
coming there.
Yeah.
Now, empower these people so that they sell charcoal in an open place where you can count, where you can measure in a hardware. You buy a gunia of sand, a gunia of cement, and then you buy a gunia of charcoal in an open place, you can count. So the Ministry of Environment can be able to count how many gunias were sold. They can be able to track where this gunia was actually harvested from. If it was not well harvested or where, then they stop that. But so long as that has not been embraced, this will continue. Number two, we need now to start encouraging biogas use. We need to start embracing issues of solar so that they can start gapping those small measures where people you have to use charcoal, and also use good cooking stoves of charcoal that can use less charcoal,
Wouldn't
so
that-
that the demand
yeah.
is less.
But that just requires Marshall Plan and affirmative action by the
Yes.
state. You know, if the way we say we're going to give laptops.
Yeah.
I don't
20
even know whether
billion.
it's Marshall. I think
You
it's
can
just
say-
display.
No,
It
I
is.
mean, we must provide people with an alternative to avoid the destruction, because they are driven there by their means and desperation and poverty levels. So you must afford them access to alternative energy that they can use, and that has to be proactive.
People who do charcoal in the Kajiado, are they Maasais?
Well, but the market will die if people have alternatives that are as good and even more safe.
Actually, I would be more interested to deal with the brokers
Yeah.
and the transporters, because they are the culprits actually,
Yeah.
who encourage and even go to the chambers down there, and
Alright.
even pay so little. It's so paying so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we come to the end, but just this whole thing, is meteorology, it used to be this, is it geography?
Okay. On the contrary, meteorology is not geography as such. You might want to know some geography a bit, but it's
What is the
actually
science?
the
Yeah.
science of mathematics and physics.
That's what is
Because you have
meteorology.
to define the physical laws in form of mathematics, so that you can be able to understand what kind of ingredients in form of data you require in those kind of physical laws. So it's really, you don't have to have done geography anywhere.
We learned
only
it
do
in geography.
mathematics.
That's why
I
I'm
know.
wondering, when I hear you speaking,
I
it's
know.
found elsewhere. It's looks like a science.
Yeah, it is a science, and therefore, geography comes in terms of knowing which area you are dealing with. But in terms of evolution of weather systems and so on, you
Yes.
need mathematics and physics.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you study it as a meteorological science.
Exactly.
I see. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for the time. Obviously, it's been very educative for people, myself included. We had Ayub Shaka, the seasoned director in charge of public services and media at the Meteorological Department, and Mr. John Kioli, who is the chair of the Kenya Working Group on Climate Change, looking at how we can consolidate our interventions and stop the damage caused by climate change. Thank you for watching Power Breakfast.